Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Town of Waukesha Joint Plan Commission and Town Board meeting for March 14th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Chairman Merrick?
Present.
Supervisor Fisher?
Here.
Supervisor Durr?
Here.
Supervisor Wolf?
Here.
Supervisor Radke?
Here.
Commissioner Webb?
Here.
Commissioner Flanagan?
Here.
Commissioner Stigler?
Here.
Commissioner Miller and Ramirez are absent.
And Madam Clerk, have we met the requirements of the open meetings law?
Yes, we have.
And we can begin with citizens' comments. Going once. Going twice. Then we can move on to meeting minutes of February 14th, 2018.
Are amended.
Correct. And everybody was in attendance, so the meeting minutes for the Plan Commission, is there a motion?
Move for approval.
And a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to the meeting minutes for the Town Board of February 14, 2018. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion we approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to 7. Accessory building for the petitioner Kevin Shimolewski, located at South 49, West 25356 Gittner Drive. Tax key is WAKT 140599818. Planner Malarkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The petitioner is requesting approval of a 40-foot by 64 feet accessory building on the property to be used for storage of ag equipment. The height of the building would be 21 feet 4 inches. He stated that the materials for the proposed building are metal siding and a metal roof with colors and windows to match the residence. The application includes pictures of the existing residence and color images of the proposed building. The property is zoned A1 agricultural. You can see it on the overhead in front of me. There's also some county shoreline zoning on the property, but that is outside of the area that the proposed accessory structure will be located. The proposed building meets all of the zoning setbacks, building separations, size requirements, quantity requirements, and use requirements of our zoning ordinance. In terms of appearance and compatibility, the Plan Commission should determine if the proposed building is compatible with the principal structure. In terms of height, the normal height required is 18 feet. They are proposing 21 feet 4 inches. Our ordinance does allow an increase in height up to 10 feet above the 18 feet if the building is set back an additional 2 feet for each 1 foot of height increase. The building is set back 40 feet from the lot line, so it does meet that requirement. But the Plan Commission and Board should determine if the increased height is appropriate for location. If the Plan Commission chooses to recommend approval of the request, I have outlined a series of 8 conditions, including a condition to require a deed restriction on the property, giving notice that the use of the accessory building is for residential or ag purposes only.
Thank you. And is the petitioner here this evening? Good evening. Questions from the Plan Commission and or Board for either the petitioner and or the planner? In that case, from the Plan Commission, if there's no questions, is there a motion from the Plan Commission?
I make a motion we approve subject to all the regulations.
And a second.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, just discussion. I think you asked that, as I understood your question, we should make a determination as to whether we think the increase in building height per section 42-37C is appropriate. Is that the essence of the question, Malarkey?
Correct. I mean, we allow the increase in height subject to Plan Commission approval.
Yeah, and I think our findings should be that that's appropriate. And I'm assuming if we were to pass the motion, that would be the consensus, but it's my opinion that that's appropriate.
Thank you. Anything else? In that case, we got a first and second from the Plan Commission. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to the town board. Is there a motion from the board?
Move we accept the recommendation of the Plan Commission.
And a second.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the material that's being used, it looks like there might be some from Mr. Chmielewski. Is that it, what you got? Yeah. Could you bring it up, please? Yeah. Because you got a good picture of your house. I wasn't clear in the material of what the material, of the color of the material. So that's the,
This is the actual colors that we're gonna use.
so that's the siding?
That's the siding and that's the
roof.
coating,
Okay.
and the wainscoting.
Oh, and the wings, okay. All right, thank you.
Anything else? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. On to 8, accessory building for petitioner Derek Aller, and I hope I didn't, okay, thank you. Located at South 21, W27467 Came Terrace, tax keys WAKT 1319050. Planner Malarkey.
Thank you. The petitioner is requesting approval of a 24-foot by 36-foot, 720 square foot accessory building to be used for personal storage in a workout exercise room. This also includes a 6-foot by 24-foot covered patio area. The height of the building is 15 feet. The petitioner has stated materials for the proposed building are vinyl siding and windows to match the color and style of the existing home. The application includes pictures of the proposed building and the home itself. The building meets all zoning requirements in terms of setbacks, size, offset, quantity, and use. The Plan Commission should determine if the proposed accessory building is compatible with the principal structure. And if the Plan Commission chooses to recommend approval, I have included a series of 9 conditions, including removal of the existing 170 square foot accessory building on the property to be removed within 30 days, and a deed restriction recording the property so that the building can be used for residential purposes only.
Thank you. From the Plan Commission, is there a motion?
I motion we approve subject to all of the conditions.
And a second.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to the board. Is there a motion from the board to recommend, take the
Move we
recommendation?
accept the recommendation of the Plan Commission.
Thank you. And a second.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Yes, just some clarification on the, on the drawing. The pool and the deck, is that already gone? It is? Okay. And then the other shed is coming down? Okay. All right, thank you, that's it.
Thank you. Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to an adjournment of the Plan Commission. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Plan Commission is adjourned. You fellas did not earn your pay tonight.
No, making up for the all-nighters.
Take a recess?
Negative. We can move on to the continuation of the town board meeting 10. Discussion and possible action on the land stewardship plan for Legend at Merrill Hills. Planner Malarkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since it's been so long and this project started a while ago, I'll just give a brief overview of the project in general, and then we'll go into each of the agenda items. So just as a refresher, Merrill Hills is a 33-unit condo development on 54.4 acres, which includes the 12-acre driving range. It's pending final approvals, and that's why we're here tonight. Conceptual plans were originally submitted in August of 2017. There was a joint public hearing on November 9th for the residential PUD conditional use request. On December 14th, that PUD and the preliminary condo plat were approved by the Plan Commission and Board. On May 10th of 2018, the Plan Commission recommended approval of the CSM to create the lot for the residential portion of the property and then the outlot for the driving range. The board approved that. And then just last month, we, by ordinance, approved the comprehensive plan change for the driving range portion of the property to be changed from low-density residential to recreational use following our public participation plan meetings and then the public hearing as well. So I have prepared a comprehensive staff report for you just to give an update on the status of all the conditions in terms of where they are. I'm not going to go into detail for each of those because what we're here to talk about tonight is the land stewardship plan, the condo documents, and the developer's agreement. They have submitted an update to the preliminary plat along with civil drawings that town engineer Chris Gianelli has started to review. They have revised the CSM as well. That has not been recorded and signed, but there's plans to do so. They plan to submit in the next month or two the final condominium plat along with the stormwater approvals and everything else from the county. So I just wanted to give an update on that. So tonight, developer's agreement, the construction access and road protection agreement, which got rolled into the development agreement, and the letters of credit will come later, the condominium documents, the land stewardship plan, and then the easements for the maintenance of Sun Valley Trail cul-de-sac and the easement for the common areas 3 and 4 to be used by the town. Those will come later as part of the condominium plat. So you're just looking at the 4 items on your agenda tonight that need town attorney and town board approval.
Thank you. Starting then with the land stewardship plan, is there a motion? Well, I'd like to get a motion out first for discussion.
I'll make a motion.
And a second.
Second.
And discussion. Counselor, do you have anything to add that?
Well, I'll start with the general comments. We have had a chance to review them, but the letters didn't go out till late today. I don't even know if the letters were distributed yet, so.
They're all on their desk.
Yeah, but they haven't, since you haven't had a chance to see them, I think the first question that needs to be asked is whether you want to go through these tonight or whether you're going to just table all of these and bring them back. I'm not recommending one way or another, but I'm not going to go through them if really the intent is just to table them because they haven't had a chance to review my comments. You understand what I mean? I can go through them if that's the intent people want, but if they're going to table them because they haven't had a chance to see them and we don't have the developers' comments back yet, then it's silly to go through them. But I'll go through them if you want to go through them. But if I go through all 4 of these and then you say tabled, we're going to think about it. I don't want to. I'd rather people just read them at their own pleasure.
So, at the end of the day, is the material relatively standard compared to other developers' agreements, other stewardship proposals, and so forth?
Yes.
Okay. Anything in there that sparked any?
Are we doing one at a time? I asked you what you wanted to do, so apparently you want me to go through them.
Stewardship.
I will go through them.
I guess I've got a question in that regard, though. A couple of catchwords. Attorney Mason just said that the developer hasn't had a chance to review them yet. Can you flesh that out a little bit more? I mean, are we expecting comments back from the developer on these? Have they not seen these or what? Where does that leave us? I mean, if we were inclined to move ahead and we do whatever we do, but the developer hasn't seen them yet, where does that leave us?
Hasn't seen the attorney's comments. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes. Well, if he doesn't accept them, then they'd have to come back unless you approved it subject to. That's totally up to you.
The developer's agreement, the petitioner did see it and also respond and agree.
Wait, does the developer want to speak to that or not? I mean, I guess that.
In the comments on we're talking land stewardship plan, I'd love to hear what they are, and we maybe will just shake hands and agree going forward right here. I don't have no idea what the comments are.
That's my.
All right, let's start with land. Let's start with land stewardship
All
comments.
right, I'm gonna go
Counselor.
through them, but if these get tabled,
Well, no.
then you've just wasted all of our time.
I mean, I'll address that, I mean, because, I mean, there's a motion and a second to discuss, and I don't have any problem discussing this, but I certainly see myself tabling this at the end of the night. But I can certainly take the comments that the attorney makes and then take that into account when I start to review the documents. But if we feel it's a waste of time, if it's gonna be tabled at the end of the night, from my point of view, I see myself making a motion to table it at the end of the night. So if we wanna do that now, then let's do it now. But I certainly take value in hearing what the attorney has to say tonight.
All right, so if we were to table it, are we tabling it to the next board meeting, which will be March the
28.
28th?
We're completely fine with the land stewardship comment.
Okay.
I had a couple comments as well that I'd like to address on that if I could.
All right, well, they wanna go through my comments. My comments on the land, do you all have the plan in front of you? The land stewardship plan? You'll notice that the intentions of the grantors, it's stated intentions of the plan. It's not a commitment, it's the intention is to do all of the following. And I make two specific responses to that. That's the first observation, is it just says in 2, intentions of grantor to accomplish the purposes of the plan, the following are the stated intentions of the plan. Someone could easily read that to say, oh, they intended to do it, but they didn't do it, and so they're not bound to do it because it's only an intention. The most specific one probably, as I say, is in 2A, where I should, depending on what your intent is, you could say they shall manage the common areas described in Exhibit C. You could even go through the whole document and say it that way. And then I make a third statement that say, if they make all the changes to the condominium declaration, they're probably bound to all of this anyway. But there may be an inconsistency. Those are my comments.
All right, on to bylaws of the condominium association.
Well, the bylaws
You wanna
are,
take-
is that,
You don't want to take one at a time?
Well,
Yeah, there was only a motion and a second to talk about the stewardship.
fair enough. We can do them one at a time. So then for 10, we've got a motion and a second. Is there a motion to approve the land stewardship plan subject to the attorney's comments?
Also move, and that's with just the understanding that the petitioner is here and in full concurrence with that. Is that fairly said?
And a second.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
well, you had comments, and I want to remind you that I'm only recommending one of them be a must. You have to decide if you want the rest of them to be a must. That's what I say in my first sentence, and so note there are no binding obligations for management described in the stewardess plan. And if they're comfortable with that, that's fine. I just want to make sure you know what you're approving.
Okay. We've got a first and a second. Any further discussion?
Well, I thought Senator Malarkey had something to say.
On which subject? On this
Land
one?
stewardship plan, correct.
Please.
So my only comment on land stewardship plan is Exhibit C kind of talks about all the common areas and what's going to happen. And as part of the original preliminary plat that was submitted in the landscape plan, I believe it was Area A, that contains the isolated natural resource area, but there's no specific language on Exhibit C that relates to the rest of the area to the south. And I know in the landscape plan that was originally submitted, there was some landscaping proposed for the area to the south of the isolated natural resource area. And I think the stormwater's gotten bigger there than it was originally.
Can you come on up to the microphone?
So the shape's gotten bigger, but there's no language in there about the management of the landscaping. It's just solely dedicated to the isolated natural resource area. So my only comment is that similar language to the rest of the common areas should be added to that outlot as well to maintain and manage the landscape.
I agree. That's fine. And a lot of this, I thought we could probably address too, just with final staff approval as kind of like overriding condition.
Okay.
Because then it may help us not get bogged down in something that may just be a nuance, which you're correct.
Does that answer your question?
That's it.
Thank you.
And, Mr. Chairman, I guess just go a step further, and I want to make sure we get clarity with Attorney Macy here. And again, we've got your letter bearing today's date. The intent of my motion, I think most of that meat is in your paragraph number 2, right? I mean, the intent of my motion is that we were accepting all of your recommendations with regard to that, including that last sentence that talks about a more definitive statement of maintenance obligations rather than just maintenance intentions within the stewardship plan. I mean, that was the intent of my motion, and maybe I didn't understand the petitioner, but I thought we were incorporating all of your recommendations. That was my understanding.
Well, it's your motion, so it's not up to council to decide what you're including in your motion.
Well,
if
I
that's
understand
what's
that, but I'm
included
telling you
in your-
that
if that's
is
what's
what the
included in your
intention
motion-
of my motion is.
If that's what's included in your motion, then that's what's included in your motion.
It is indeed, and I want to make sure that's
And,
clear.
Supervisor
Yes.
Wolf, thank you, agrees. So
Yes.
that is the intent of the motion. And the petitioner is good with that. Thank you. Anything further?
Okay, could I have the motion right back?
So the motion is to accept the land stewardship plan with incorporating the commentary from council, specifically paragraph number 2.
Okay,
And Sean's change.
Well, I don't think Sean had a change. It was, they're gonna work that out with staff.
okay, somebody has to be the final arbiter to make sure that they've done what I've said. And I don't care if it's me, or it's Kathy, or it's the town chairman, but you can't just pass a motion saying they gotta do it. Somebody has to be the one to make the decision that they did it.
Fair enough.
I don't care if it's the
Supervisor
planning.
Fisher, you made the motion. Who would you choose to make that determination?
I would say that Planner Malarkey and Attorney Macy ought to do that. I'd be real comfortable with that.
Very good.
Thank you.
Anything further? All in favor? Opposed?
Opposed?
Motion carries. On to 11, discussion and possible action on the bylaws of the Condominium Association for the Legend at Merrill Hills. Is there a motion? I'll make the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And Planner Malarkey, commentary?
The only comments I have is that we've seen these before as part of the preliminary plat process, and they're substantially consistent with what was previously shown, and the information that's in there in terms of units and sizes and requirements as discussed with the PUD approval are consistent as well.
Thank you. And council?
Yes, and this goes hand in hand with the bylaws and the declaration, because the comments are basically the same between the two. If they put them in one, they should put them in the other. We have a specific request that they deal with the maintenance of the common area. Again, sort of the same theme we had with the first document. We ask, and again, they're listed in the bylaws one as to they got to decide how to get them in here. In the declaration of condominium one, they're very specific as to where they go. Does that make sense? And they're the same comments.
Okay.
So I just list them in 2, and I don't tell them where to put them, but they'll figure out where to put them. Okay? And that's not a problem, I'm sure, for them. So, maintenance of the common areas, no fees or assessments. These are standard things that we look for in all, there's certain things, it's their declaration of condominium and their bylaws. We just look to protect the town, okay? And so we don't deal with the size of the buildings or any of that kind of stuff. Those are policy decisions. We just look at the legal stuff. Make sense? So we'd like to have better language on the maintenance of the common area. It's laid out here for you. You can all read it. No fees or assessments in the event of a tax foreclosure. This is something Waukesha County, and Josh would certainly know this. He's probably seen it for 20 or 15 years, this language. You can't get through Waukesha County without putting that you're not charging Waukesha County if they take something back in tax foreclosure. And so we always just tack onto that, and when Waukesha County isn't involved, we put the paragraph in, and as a courtesy, we always list them as also. Then we thought there needed to be some bolstering of language about the private driveways and things like that, and we have some suggested language. Obviously, these are just suggested language. They may have other language. that works better for them, but those are the three areas that I felt needed to be tightened up. And the comments are going to be the same with the declaration as with the bylaws.
Thank you. So I would amend my motion to include the recommendations from council into the bylaws.
And again, we'll need to know who is going to sign off on the final drafts when they bring it back.
And
This, we've got two issues with these comments.
okay, come on up to the microphone.
So we only have two issues as we read these comments quickly. One, we've discussed, and I did not include in the latest draft, single-side road parking, so I need to add that. This proposal says there's no parking on the street. Under the private driveway, under number 1, nobody can have a guest on the street based on this language. So that has to change.
Yeah, the preliminary plat was approved with the idea that it would be single-sided parking only, and it would be incorporated on the face of the final plat as well as the condominium document.
And it's primarily for emergency access, so there's no problems there. But to not allow anybody to park on the street, I'm not aware of anybody with that kind of restriction, public or private roads. So that's your.
There's a restriction for that in the town.
I'm sorry, sir?
There's no parking on the streets in the town.
So in all our community subdivisions that you have that are,
November to, yeah.
At certain times of the year.
Right.
Right.
this is ever. And that's honestly not anything we discussed in our prior negotiations.
But that's a public road. These are private roads.
Understand.
Okay.
So we would want to go to the language we'd already discussed, which is single-side road parking. We still have to add also the language relative to siren-activated gates, which I omitted. That's a slip-up on my part. And then finally, on the maintenance.
What was the second one?
We hadn't added the, I have not added the siren language that activated the gates for the emergency vehicles. Those are the two things that I think.
Right, and it wasn't my contention necessarily that that had to be in the condo docs, but that would have to be in the engineering plans shown somewhere, and that wasn't there.
And we have no problem in putting in the condo docs if that satisfies the concern of making sure that they're added wherever they need to be. We're happy to add them. We missed it in these docs. But in the condo docs, we were supposed to add the single-sided parking, and we have not yet. And then the maintenance of common areas, you only give 7 days to correct the problem. That's really short. If it rains, how are you going to expect somebody to get something corrected in 7 days? We propose 30, but we have no problem with the correction of maintenance of the common areas. We just think the time frame is a little short. Those are our comments.
Your roads are what is the width of the roads?
While he looks that up, are we constrained to the siren-activated gate and not just an Opticon-activated gate?
We were going off your recommendation.
I understand. I mean, I don't know that we want an ambulance to be sitting in the middle of a residential neighborhood with his siren wailing so that we can get the gate to open when we could just have an Opticon triggered. I mean, we could discuss that with the chief, but I would think that there's better ways to trigger that than a siren.
Well, luckily the chief happens to be in the audience. So what?
Either way, whatever is best.
Chief, what do you want to come on up and tell us what your preference is?
The reason we asked for siren-activated devices is because you don't have to be straight on to the Opticom light to do that. In this case, the Opticom light would be way too close to the gates, and the trucks would have to just sit there and wait for them to open, where with the siren, the gates will be open by the time they get to it. And they don't sit there and wail. The sirens are going to be blowing anyway.
Well, but
they don't sit there and wail.
Hasn't it been your experience that when they turn into a residential neighborhood in the middle of the night, they turn the siren off and leave the lights on?
Sometimes not, but it takes about 10 seconds for these things to activate with the sound of the siren. So even if it's not going to take that long, and you don't have to have a nice straight road. They can do it coming around the curve, where with the Opticom they have to be straight on to the light.
So your preference then is the siren activated?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, my concern is that they're gonna approach it with their siren off. And not be aware that they gotta turn their siren on.
Oh, trust me, they'll be aware.
All right.
Thank you. Road width.
Road width. Our interior, our private road is 24 feet of pavement and then 31 inch, so like 2.5 foot mountable curb on either side. So we end up with 29 feet of hard surface. So what you'll see with that one side parking, you'll see within like 7 feet of one side parking and then about 22 feet of two-way drive aisle still available.
So plenty for emergency access, and would you concur with that,
Absolutely.
Chief? So about 7 feet on one side for single side parking, and then 22 feet of paved surface for emergency access.
We have 29 feet of hard surface.
Well, no, with the curb.
It's a mountable
With a mountable curb.
Yeah,
That includes the curb?
yeah. It's with the roll curb.
How wide are the curbs?
30 inch.
So you're taking off roughly 5.5 feet then for that 29 feet you're not.
You have 20.
No.
You have a 24-foot wide asphalt, and then you know the 30 inch on either side.
So you take 8 feet off their parking, you'll have a
20.
16-foot paved area.
21. Because you park on mountable, you end up parking kind of right on.
You're gonna be able to follow snow on the curb. You follow to the curb, there'll be snow piles on it, you'll be able to park that curb.
I do.
You can get it up over that curb.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's reasonable.
If you make the requirement that we do plow through the curb, we can make sure that happens. Good news is that my staff is gonna be lives in the building,
The mountable part of the curb is only a 6 to 8 inch piece. The balance of it is flat. So,
Well, let's go back to the maintenance of the common area first, and I know everybody just got this. I was trying to protect you by saying the minimum they gave you was 7 days. They couldn't say, isn't that what it says? The above reference notice shall give the association a minimum of 7 days, so that they didn't say you have to go out there within 24 hours or 48 hours. So
We misread 7 days as a deadline
No.
at 7 days as opposed to beginning at 7 days.
a minimum of 7 days. So again, I think we need to look at these and study them, and this is not fair to anybody. And but the board wanted to do it through it, and that's great. That's my job. And so I think we got to get the policy decisions made, and then again, you'll be picking if you're of a mind to approve it tonight. It'll be subject to, these aren't big issues, and so I'm not trying to make mountains out of molehills out here at all. So, and somebody will sign off, myself or the planner or Kathy, at the end. And as long as we know what your intent is, the big pictures on the driveway, for instance, and the maintenance and common elements. I mean, there are going to be some we're going to call you up and say, hey, you got to get the snow and the ice off of there. We're getting complaints from all your people, and we're going to call you and tell you to do that right away, of course, because you can't get through, right?
I would suppose if his 33 residents are complaining about snow and ice, they're not going to call us, they're going to call him.
But more importantly, the home that we bought for the emergency access, that's who's gonna be plowing the roads. As an employee, you're gonna be calling Sam, but he's gonna tap on his door. We're gonna bypass both of us.
Okay.
Okay.
So I would amend my motion to include that the notice shall be that there's 30 days to correct the problem, and not a 7-day, because I agree it's kind of ambiguous when you say a minimum of 7 days to correct.
I mean, you can put a minimum and a maximum in.
Well, John, you can't tell them to go fix their weeds and they got 30 days to cut their weeds. They'll all be into seeds and they'll all, so careful what you're saying. You get a complaint that the common areas look like heck, and it's legit or not legit, and our people look at it and they say it's legit. Kathy sends the building inspector out there, I assume that's would be the one in our community who generally does that. And he'd come back and he'd say, yeah, that's a legitimate complaint. Somebody's been throwing garbage on there. You want to give them 30 days to clean up their garbage? I mean, I'm telling you, these are very practical. They're going to generally maintain it, and it's probably gonna be more stuff that they just haven't noticed yet, and it doesn't serve any purpose to say, you got 30 days to clean up your problem. I mean,
Well, 7 sounds a little short.
We're not speaking to 7 days being the maximum time we have to clean up the problem either. This book, the minimum to 7 days.
the purpose is, and I would suggest that the developers come back with language, they understand what the intent was. I'm not sure that we need to put something in here. You know, we hate language. What you normally see is a reasonable time will be agreed to, and then everybody knows, and no one has any idea what that means. So I think if you, I don't know that you have to put a time limit in. They can work on it. You know, that in all instances they'll be given at least, 48 hours or something, whatever,
So,
I'll get this added to match your concern, short of making sure we have single-side parking.
but we're going to come to that one. I just went back to the beginning. So if you want to put 30 days in, that's fine. If you want to say, that the planner and the attorney will have the authority to approve it, but your intent is to just make it clear that if we give them notice, they get time to clean it up, but,
I'd be comfortable.
subject to the planner and the attorney approving the final language.
If I may, two things. First of all, and I know this is, and it probably overlaps in some of it, written in the declaration of condominium, one of the questions I was going to have too is the language that you wrote, Attorney Macy, said the above referenced notice shall give the association a minimum of 7 days to correct the problem. And then it said if the common elements are not properly landscaped and are maintained within the time granted by the above referenced notice, the town shall then have the authority to landscape, et cetera, et cetera. That was confusing language to me too, so I'm glad we're taking that up. And I guess the other question I would have, we've got a number of things in play now that seem like they need to be cleaned up. I guess my question would be to the petitioner, even if this was not acted upon tonight, where we got some of these housekeeping things and it were to come back at the next meeting, is that handicapping you or hurting you in any way if we get time to get it cleaned up?
As long as we're in agreement on what those housekeeping issues are. And so right now I'm comfortable short of the single-side parking.
Okay.
But, I mean, yeah, I think this language could be easily accommodated by future approval by Sean and the attorney. But
I think rather than bring it back to another board meeting, letting staff handle the simple language changes would be appropriate.
Well, it might be, but my concern is that there's clarity about it, that how many people in the room don't walk away from tonight and have a different understanding. That's my concern.
I
If we
think
can get that all cleaned up.
I think we're washing that out pretty well. We understand.
Well, I think any motion then needs to include those provisions, so it's clear.
I agree.
Okay, so let's make a stab at the motion. Kathy, we'll start over. It's a motion to approve the bylaws for the Legend of Merrill Hills Condominium Association, Inc., subject to the final language being approved by the town planner and the town attorney. Under 2A, the maintenance of common elements, the developer has the ability to clarify the intent, which is to grant a reasonable time. We're not going to use that word. A reasonable time under what the complaint is or the situation is. And, if we're comfortable that they're asking for an unreasonable amount of time and they're making sure they're protected, that we don't give them an unreasonably short period of time, we'll work that out. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. You've made it clear that this language is not clean enough and you want to tighten it up. It'll still be objective, not subjective standards. Fair enough? Kathy can summarize that, that we have the right to modify that, but is that the kind of guidance you're looking for, Mr. Fisher?
Well, I guess I'm kind of wondering why wouldn't we clean it up tonight?
Well, I don't know why we wouldn't get this all on the table and then table it and let them bring it back with it cleaned up. That was my intent for the discussion of the documents and the attorney's comments. I mean, I didn't want to put this off a whole nother meeting after the next meeting so that we all could sit and read everybody's comments. I was trying to consolidate it by at least one by not tabling it right away. Let's get the ambiguity out of it, and then that gives all the parties involved 2 weeks to get it into writing and be very specific, and then bring it back to the board. That's why I wanted to have the discussion before I made the motion to table it, because once I make the motion to table it, we're not gonna talk about it anymore.
Agreed?
Makes sense.
So, I mean, let's get it all hashed out, then they're very clear as to the intention of the board, but for this level of ambiguity, from my point of view, it needs to come back to the board. And if they can do all that in 2 weeks, I'm all for it.
So what I'm hearing is the single-sided road parking needs to be addressed?
That's what
How
I
does the board
heard.
feel about that? And then also the siren,
The siren doesn't sound like,
activated.
yeah, it
Sounds
just sounds like it was an omission, so that's fine. And now we gotta clean up
And
the
the-
time frame.
and the time frame.
Yeah.
Those were the three things I had then.
So I don't think that that's a huge obstacle to overcome. We're talking about parking on on one side of the road, and the siren is an omission, and the time frame. And I think those could be easily hashed out by staff and not brought back to the board. And I would amend my motion to that effect if Supervisor Wolf is agreeable to that.
Well, I guess I would speak to that. I'm not comfortable about the hashing out about the maintenance time to basically, I don't want to say dump that, but on Attorney Macy and Planner Malarkey, I think that's something that ought to be resolved tonight. I mean, they can go to put the language together, but I think we ought to get that resolved tonight.
All right, what's your time frame?
Why don't we leave the language as is?
Leave it the way it is, at a minimum 7 days?
Why don't we leave the language as is? I understand the attorney's role better having discussed it than I did on my first 4-second read.
Understood.
I
That
guess
is
I don't
acceptable to you?
understand that. Is it a maximum of 7 days?
Minimum.
I don't understand what that means. If it's a minimum of 7 days, then it seems to me an interpretation of that could be you could take 30 or 60 days or whatever. What is the intention? That it's done within 7 days? Or maybe take the word minimum or maximum out. Is that your intention, Attorney Macy, that it is done within 7 days?
No. So
No.
you have to understand that we have 38 years of experience. We know what they're gonna come back with. And so we were trying to anticipate it, okay? Many of them will say, if you just strike that sentence, the comment I get back, and rightfully so, is, what if they give us 24-hour notice? What if they give us 48-hour notice? And then they always come back with, the notice shall at least be reasonable, okay? So I was trying, apparently not successfully. So, the above reference notice shall give the association, and if you want to clarify it, we can add a phrase there, a specific time by which they have to address the maintenance issue. The same to be a minimum of 7 days to correct the problem. There's some language that it's supposed to say the notice is supposed to give you a time limit. That time limit can't be less than 7 days. Does that make sense?
Do you want to put a maximum?
Pardon?
Which still puts the control on the town to be able to set that time frame.
Right. They can say you got 30 days to replant the trees that have all died. You got that, or you have 6 months to replant the trees that died.
We're comfortable the town will be reasonable in setting that time frame. And so if 7 days is in there, get why it's there. That's additional language makes complete sense to me.
So
And-
question, so then what you're saying then it's up to the board, depending on what the issue is, we dictate how many days they've got?
Yes.
So if it's a planting thing and it's the middle of winter, we're gonna dictate them longer. If it's a simple thing in the summer, we're gonna dictate them shorter.
Yes.
And if it's a dangerous situation, or
Right.
they're ready to go to the noxious weeds, they're ready to go to flower. I mean, that's the kind of complaint you're going to get. Is their man who lives in, or man or woman who lives in that house hasn't walked to that quadrant lately and doesn't realize that there's a noxious weed, and a neighbor calls and says, would you please have them cut their noxious weeds before? Now we have a noxious weed guy, and that person may be taking care of that separate and aside. Maybe noxious weeds was a bad example, but.
What the kids call them.
Yeah, and the neighbor's right, you know, and they just need to know about it. So in some respects, 7 days may be way too long for a noxious weed,
Right.
but anyway, we were trying to be fair. So I think by adding, you know, the above notice shall give the association a specific time by which they have to,
Address and
use the
maintain
word
issue.
correct the problem, down below, and so I should probably, use it again, right? Correct the problem, Kathy, and I know you were writing.
Yeah,
So-
I had address and maintain issue.
I overcomplicated.
Same to be
I
a
think I
minimum
can
of 7
simplify.
days.
I
is what
think
you
if I
said.
just say a specific time by which to correct the problem, the same to be a minimum of 7 days, we've stated it more succinctly. Now, you have to decide if that addresses the ambiguities that those who read it were concerned about. I was listening, and I'm hoping that I did, but I'll defer to the body.
I'm good with it. Larry? Okay.
Now, not all of these would necessarily come back to the board for a decision. If it's noxious weeds, we're not gonna come to the board to
Just the
say
regular
you've got
process.
Right.
30 days.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we've got a first and a second amended.
Okay, wait, okay, I got the one-sided parking, so C1 will be changed to allow for one-sided parking. Now, will a map decide this? How is it decided which side is the parking is gonna be on? Is this, I'm not trying to be anal here, I'm just trying to say, you know, Joe decides my side and Bill decides, no, it's my side. Is there a,
It'll be in the developer's agreement.
okay,
So the one-sided parking will be in the developer's agreement. You'll have to define which side of the road you're gonna park on.
Typically, that's done with either a north versus south or an east versus west based on the way the road's facing.
Yes,
That's what we use.
thank you.
okay. The next question, that they offered to plow.
Can I just ask one question about the parking part of it? I mean, we can do whatever we want here tonight on March 14th, 2019. I mean, would it be your intention then, assuming that you get permission to park on one side, would it be your intention to post one side of the roadway as no parking, so we don't have people on one side one place and someplace another place? I mean, wouldn't that be a practical way to do it? I mean,
Preference, because it wouldn't be the homeowner. I'd rather have my homeowners all understand where they should park.
well, how would they know that?
It would be in the condo docs. And we could, and in the bylaws, and when they take ownership, we could say, here's the common rules that you need to be aware of.
So designating which side or that type of thing? Okay.
Okay, so I've added one-sided parking as specified in the condo docs and declaration. You comfortable with that?
Yes, sir.
So when you come back, I mean, Josh is
I'll be
taking
more
lots of
specific
notes
with the
too.
language, yeah.
You're gonna come back with new documents, you're absorbing all of this, so you can come back
It
with.
was fully intended to be in this next level, and it's an omission on my part, I just will.
Yeah, so the ones, the parking, yeah, obviously private driveway is something you wanna have this in here as much as we wanna have this in here, or more so. So now we have one-sided parking as specified in the condo docs and declaration. So that handles that, it'll be clear, set forth right from the get-go. And I assumed, I didn't wanna put as indicated by the signs, this is a high-end private community, they're not gonna wanna have no parking signs scattered through this development, I'm guessing, I'm just guessing. And so that's why he wants to do it another way, of course.
Right.
Then they offered to plow to the curb, and is that the wishes that he include that, of the body? He offered, and I'm just asking if he needs direction as to whether in the next draft they should have that in there or not.
Yeah, plow to the curb. I mean, you're gonna do that no matter what. You're not gonna plow half the road.
Well, okay, we're gonna put it in, plow to the curb, that's fine.
This will
And
not
they're
be
gonna-
Milwaukee.
And they're gonna add the siren, and for the two of you, this is all on tape, so if you wanna go back to pick up any of this or the nuances of any of this, it'll be posted, correct, Kathy?
Correct.
So, okay, were there any other concerns that first the developer had? And the body? So there's a motion to, I think there's a motion, Kathy?
Yes, there's a motion
By
and a
Chairman.
second to, and it is amended to incorporate the comments from council and or planner.
And subject to their final approval.
Yes.
So if I'm understanding the motion, it's everything we talked about. They're gonna come back and get an agreement between our staff, and it all makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
I'm comfortable with that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries. On to discussion and possible action on the developers agreement for the Legend at Merrill Hills.
As Kathy's indicated, this one did get out earlier, and they have responded that they're comfortable with all of the proposed changes.
Thank you.
I was working off a different model. I apologize.
No,
The model, long-winded answer is I'm comfortable with all of the rewrite.
Very good. I'll make the motion.
The planner has some comments, Mr. Chairman. You can make the motion first, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to get it on. I'd like to make the motion to accept the developers agreement subject to the attorney's comments as well as the planner's comments. Is there a second? And Planner Malarkey. The Malarkey report, please.
Thank you. So the only comment that I have was previously mentioned by the applicant was the name Merrill Hills Parkway should be changed to Mary Hills Parkway. I think Administrator Nicholas has already taken care of that. The other comment I had is since the road protection agreement is now folded into the development agreement, the text actually references the developer taking status of the condition of the roadway. That should be changed to town engineer. He's actually begun to do that. So that would be my recommendation.
Very good. Any discussion?
I do ask always, though, because some things come up, that there be a target person. It doesn't have to be me, because I'm done. Somebody who signs off at the final draft is fine.
I'm fine with it being you, me, or the planner. What's the pleasure of the board?
Planner?
Planner.
Planner okay with that? I mean, the planner knows that he can go to me and the engineer and Kathy if he needs to. He just won't approve it if he needs input from any of us, and we all work that way. If I need planning comments, I'm not going to sign off till I know the planner. Kathy knows if you assign it to her, she's never going to do it until she knows the engineer, the planner, and the lawyer have signed off on it. So
it's the planner.
Sounds good.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to 13, discussion and possible action on the declaration of condominium for the Legend at Merrill Hills. I will make a motion for approval. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And discussion.
Well, we have to be consistent. This one, I don't have to go through it again. My comments are the same, so it should be with the same motion, subject to the declaration being modified per the discussions under the bylaws section, and subject to the final draft being approved by the engineer and planner and attorney. That's the way we did the declaration.
And I would amend my motion to that regard. Supervisor Fisher?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to 14, authorization of the payment of the bills. First, in the amount of $8,258.04 to Ruckert and Melke. I'll make a motion to approve that amount. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Don't we have to do a roll
I'm sorry, roll call. Thank you. I even have that roll.
Chairman
down.
Merrick?
Aye.
Supervisor Durr?
Aye.
Supervisor Radke?
Aye.
Supervisor Wolf?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
Abstain.
Motion carries. On to the balance of the bills in the amount of $181,622.97. I will make a motion to approve payment of the bills. Is there a second?
Second.
And Madam Clerk, a roll call vote.
Chairman Merrick?
Aye.
Supervisor Fisher?
Aye.
Supervisor Durr?
Aye.
Supervisor Radke?
Aye.
Supervisor Wolf?
Aye.
Motion carries. Lastly, is there a motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
And a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
I found the gavel.
Have a good evening, everybody.